Yo, it's your boy, Brill Crony, a comedian. This one's going to be a little bit different. This week it's going to be Anthony Jeselnik. It's going to be a little bit more breakdown, a little bit less reaction. I tried to do this before, but given how much of his content on YouTube is on the Netflix is a joke channel, and some of it's like Comedy Central sort of associated, I'm not sure how much I can get away with reacting and sharing with on here. But I actually just saw him live a week ago. Good nights out in Raleigh, North Carolina. So it's fresh in my mind, and I think whatever. Let's just try to get into it right now. Let's start with some of the roast material.
But I did think it was interesting that you have your own line of perfume, you know, for that special lady who wants to smell like who gives a fuck. I'm glad William Shatner could squeeze this roast into his schedule. In between cosmetic surgeries. Bill, your face is so plastic that when you're done with it, they're gonna have to cut it up into little pieces so that birds don't die.
I fucking love that one. So if you're anything like me, I found out about Anthony Jeselnik when I was pretty young. I was a kid, and I knew about him because of the Comedy Central roasts. He kind of stole the show on a lot of those, especially that Charlie Sheen one. And I think his sort of popularity after that, a lot of it is due to how well he was received on those roasts, but also his style of doing stand-up is a little bit similar, is like pretty similar to his roast. Whereas like somebody like Shane Gillis has done roasts before in different forums, and just because you like the sort of like snappier, like shorter form stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna like the stand up. Whereas with Jeselnik, it's pretty similar.
And Steve, I know you were in a dark place for a while, you were struggling, but now you're trying stand-up comedy. I actually saw you perform once at the Comedy Cellar, and here's some free advice, Steve-O. Don't give up your suicide.
Fucking yikes, bro. Yeah, he was definitely a like, oh, he went there kind of guy. Which, you know, back when this came out, early 2010s, this kind of edgy stuff was like huge back then. It was like the perfect time for him to get this sort of exposure.
Patrice O'Neill is here. You literally cannot miss him. Holy Christ, you're fat. You look like you deep fry your hands before you bite your fingernails.
That's a good joke.
I'm putting this clip in the video for sure because that's a really good joke, and also because if you look right here,
you look like you deep fry your hands before you bite your fingernails.
That's a good joke.
Patrice O'Neill's reaction is just like exactly what I do when I hear like a good joke on Kill Tony or whatever. I'm just like, nice.
He's like, I know I'm going to a comedy show, but just in case there's a trampoline.
It's a good line. So, I don't know. Makes me feel like I'm doing something right.
Mike Tyson, I love you. You're my favorite boxer of all time. I don't even want to stand up here and make fun of you. Besides, what can you say about Mike Tyson that hasn't already been the title of a Richard Pryor album?
Oh, shit.
Yeah. You got it.
Patrice O'Neill really liked that one. Oh, shit. Patrice O'Neill liked that one. That was a better joke than I thought. I didn't get that one when I was a child.
Hasn't already been the title of a Richard Pryor album.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. You got it.
I did.
Patrice got it.
Too many white people to get that.
Too many white people? You know what no one ever says is too few black people.
You see that the goats respect Jeselnik. But yeah, like I was saying about his roast style sort of meshing well with his stand-up style, that sort of brings us to, I mean, the sort of performance aspect of Anthony Jeselnik.
Yesterday, I accidentally hit a little kid with my car. It wasn't serious. Nobody saw me.
That is, like, in its essence, like the standard 5 out of 10 Jeselnik joke. Like that's probably like the most average Jeselnik joke that there is. You kind of have everything that I'm going to talk about in that. So you have
Finally, hit a little kid with my car.
the subject material is always very it's always going to be what you would call like dark humor, very like deadpan sort of delivery with his like Christopher Walken voice. Usually pretty like straight-faced for the most part, and he's always going to portray himself as the villain. He's always going to be the villain in the joke, even if that isn't what the setup is. Even if it sounds like something positive from him in the setup, it's always going to come back to him being like the worst person imaginable. He kind of does the same joke over and over and over and over and over again in that way, where it's like set up like, oh, this terrible thing happened, unfortunately, and then the punchline is always just like, actually it was me who was behind all of it. You know, it's like a Scooby-Doo villain. Like he just keeps taking the mask off at the end over and over again.
Nobody saw me.
And there's this little smirk right here. So you have these sort of like winks at the audience. Makes it a little bit more palatable rather than just being like rigid and like I'm never going to make a facial expression all the time. It adds levity to the performance when you're talking about child abuse and murder and sexual assault the entire fucking hour or whatever, having those sort of moments like strategically placed in his sets and being ready for like the audience sort of response to that, because you're going to get pops on top of what you already said in the joke. Like you're going to sort of like when you add the sort of like character break, it's going to pull another like laugh break out of the audience.
Like about a month ago, some kids in my neighborhood were playing hide and go seek, and one of them ended up in an abandoned refrigerator. It's all anybody talked about for weeks. I said, who cares? How many kids you know get to die a winner?
That might be one of my favorite jokes of his. That one right there.
My mom actually should have been on one of the planes that crashed on 9/11. I think,
yeah.
it's fun to do 9/11 jokes in Canada.
But yeah, you see the structure right there, and the more you'll watch, the more you'll start to see what I mean. Where you start filling in the blanks with where it's going.
And I'll never forget the first time I had sex. You know those stories you hear about kids who lose their virginity to the hot babysitter? I was the babysitter.
Exactly.
And while we're hiking, she gets bit by a snake in between two toes. And I had to suck out the poison. So she's dead. Like I've got a kid in Africa. Yeah. That I feed. That I clothe. That I school. That I inoculate for 75 cents a day. Which is practically nothing, compared to what it costs to send them there.
You know what it is, but within that structure, he's able to get very creative with it. And you can take it all these sort of different directions when you have the understanding of sort of how you write jokes and whatnot. It's like the White Stripes. There's not a lot going on with that band. It's like you have drummer and guitar and singing. That is it. There's no bass or anything like that. So you just kind of get creative within the limitations of the band within that framework itself. He's been doing these jokes the same way effectively his entire career. Like any of those jokes that he came up with back in these like early 2010s clips of him, like they wouldn't change at all if he wrote them today. And all of his stuff today he could have come up with back then, and it would make just as much sense. Like there's no like there hasn't really been any sort of real like evolution in his act at all, and why why should you feel the need to change anything up if it's working? I don't know. It could be seen as laziness, but I don't. There's something about it where I just don't get that read from him. I guess I don't necessarily see it as lazy because as someone who's I've seen most of his specials. I more so get the impression that he has an idea in his head of what he wants his act to be, and I see him as just pretty sort of detail oriented, and really having a handle and being able to have like absolute control over what you're going to say. Because when you do stand up, you're sort of sometimes people like I know I sometimes go like my sets go better if it's almost like I'm remembering what I'm saying on the fly. Like I know how it goes, but it's like I need to sort of get into it and start doing it. I don't know exactly beat for beat exactly what I'm going to say every single time. Whereas I don't think he's like that at all. Because he's not a one special a year kind of guy. He has how many specials? He has Shakespeare, Caligula, Thoughts and Prayers, Fire in the Maternity Ward, Fire in the Maternity Ward, and Bones and All, which just came out um, not super long ago. 2010, 2013, 2015, 2019, 2024. It hasn't been cranking them out. And you figure if it really is that low effort, while you're doing it, you're just going to crank out specials all the time. And one of the other reasons why I don't see him as incredibly lazy is just how lazy comedy has gotten. Because you can see some of his like contemporaries, if you want to call them that. A lot of these guys who kind of came up in a similar time and maybe had a similar sort of style, whereas like I was saying, he was like the like oh he went there like oh too soon or like sort of guys when he sort of blew up. And there are a lot of guys who kind of rode that wave. And now a lot of those guys who rode that wave are now more so influencers than they are comedians. Because that's like a new wave to ride. Y'all remember this motherfucker? You guys remember this fucking guy?
When I was at school, a girl called Alice wanked off a dog for 3 cigarettes. I know what you're thinking. How did a dog get cigarettes?
Similar sort of edgy subject material was big around the same time. I want to say like early 2010s. I remember hearing about him more. And then if you check in on him more recently,
taken a long time. But I do think it's something that if you could teach it in schools, the idea of comedy, even as opposed to music, which is wonderful to learn, and you appreciate music much more.
Yeah, it just kind of comes off to me now as his head is just completely up his ass.
I think stand-up should be a course in schools. If you think about what it's about verbal dexterity, right? And it's about being able to express yourself. And it's about finding your voice and expressing who you are.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm an American and our school system is pretty fucking awful. Maybe you have the time and resources to worry about something like that in the UK. But fuck off, dude. Tell some fucking jokes, bro. Like, why are you in my face with this shit, bro? The point I'm making is that Jeselnik isn't doing any of this stuff. And I think just staying on the sort of course he's on and not really diversifying in a way, to somebody like me, I will sort of roll my eyes at it sometimes and be like, I don't need to see this new special because I've seen the other specials. I know exactly what's going to happen. But I do have a certain respect for him being as like workmanlike, I guess he is, as he is. And when I saw him a week ago, he did something which I never see comedians really do. This might sound silly for me to bring this up when I'm sort of being positive about him, but he brought his set list on stage with him, I believe. And it wasn't distracting after you first saw him do it. And I get why, especially with his sort of style, when it's very heavy on like one-liners, like quick jokes. It makes it way harder to remember all that than having something like almost more like a story and being able to have like this logically leads into this, which leads into this, and all that. And doing all that one-liner shit for an hour, probably like pretty brutally difficult to try to remember all that. But yeah, like I was saying, it wasn't like an obvious crutch watching him do it live. It made me think about it a little bit differently, like as a comic. I think about it, and I see him as somebody who is, and if you look at that, the bringing the set list on stage, from like a the perfectionist sort of lens, like it's a waste of his time if he goes on stage and then forgets like one of his one-liners, that he could have fit in there, and then doesn't get a chance to get that sort of rep in, especially if you're somebody like that, you're preparing to record your next special. All the shows that you're seeing him do, they're for the purpose of him preparing for his next one. The way I have perceived Anthony Jeselnik has changed a lot. Whereas when I sort of caught on to what the formula was, I was just like, I don't need, fuck this, basically. But then I can still go back and hear an Anthony Jeselnik joke, and it will follow that formula. And there's times where it gets me to laugh, and it gets me to laugh pretty hard. Like being able to, like very simply, just like place yourself in a situation and make yourself the villain. Like the more bad things happen, bad things get invented or whatever, like you're never gonna run out of things to talk about, really. Whereas like a lot of these other guys who maybe aren't as good, and their whole thing was just like they're going to talk to you about like the person you are. Maybe you were an interesting person in 2012, and now you're doing Joe Rogan episode number 783, and you're talking about how like we should teach kids how to fucking do fucking puns or whatever. It's just like, oh, shut up, bro. The meme, what's the deal with airline food? That's a trope because of comedians getting as popular and famous as they are, and their whole life becomes touring, and then the only thing you have personal experiences with just in your normal life is just traveling. So everybody's just talking about airline food because that's your life at that point. Sounds kind of sad. But whereas if you're doing something like this, playing more of a character. No, as an audience member, you don't get you don't feel as connected to them or whatever. But it's consistent, is what it is. And you know what it sort of reminds me of, and this might sound blasphemous to some people, that style of like the combination of it, like being like very one-liner heavy and like hamming up like this persona that isn't the real you. Reminds me of Rodney Dangerfield a little bit. Now, I personally greatly prefer listening to Rodney Dangerfield over Anthony Jeselnik. Dangerfield's one of my all-time favorites. But I see the similarity, and the more I think about it, that maybe it's that comparison I came up with in my head that makes me like Jeselnik a little bit better. But it also, something I thought of the other day after seeing him, is like you have this very easy to maintain style that Jeselnik has. You were able to do it when you're in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s. Seeing it would be interesting to see how it would change as like Jeselnik becomes like a geezer. Like a geezer Jeselnik. That sounds fun to me. How old is he now? He's 47. So he's, give it like 10 more years. We'll have that for sure. But I'll be waiting patiently for geriatric Anthony Jeselnik to put out his. Well, that's only like 3 specials away, I guess. He doesn't put them out super often. Finishing the editing on this video right now. Yeah, in summary, I would say I'm a pretty big fan. As good he is at what he does, I mean, it is predictable, and if it's not your style, the edgy sort of like shock humor stuff isn't your style, you're gonna get absolutely nothing out of this. And if you think he sucks and that's just not your thing, it's a valid opinion to have. As far as like a rating goes, I think like if you asked me a few years ago, I would have given him like a 4 out of 10 or something like that, because I'm inner hater in me that can like predict his punchlines. Will give it a lower score. I was like, but you catch me on a random day, maybe I'll give him a 10 out of 10 or something, because of how good he is at the specific thing that he does very well. Feeling right now, just the vibes, giving him an 8.5 out of 10. 8.5 out of 10, Hall of Laughs, because I just saw him the other day and he did this really funny joke, talking about like, oh yeah, AI is getting into the wrong hands and people are using it to make AI child pornography. But I can tell. And like, that was the joke. That was probably my favorite joke that he did. One more thing I will say that I forgot to mention is like while I have had the criticisms of the lack of evolution with Jeselnik's act, that is something that when I saw him live, he actually touched on. And his first joke that he did was something like oh, people want me to like open up more and be like more personal with the audience or whatever, and like people are always telling me and suggesting me to do that, and I always say to them like no, like nobody gets to watch Michael Jordan play baseball today. And you know, it was funny, he got a good laugh, but it's like in that way, while still remaining the same person, he was not one dimensional in that, where he still sort of addressed that criticism. I thought it was it was interesting to see, and then he kind of brought it back to that at the end of the set, and he did, in his own words, mention the lack of evolution. And he sort of briefly touched on it. It sort of counteracts his goal with doing comedy, and being able to find more ways to make what he does already successful is more so his goal than rather trying to reinvent himself. So it just gave me a little bit different of a perspective, seeing him do that live, because when he said it, I remember it caught me off guard because it was a little bit more I would say it was uncharacteristically self-deprecating what he said, because he said in his own words, not evolving at all as he's done stand-up more. Not too much more to add. I am very interested in seeing like 65-year-old Jeselnik do stand-up, because I think that could be he has an act that I could see getting better like the older he gets. But yeah, anyway, thank you.